regardless of like downloads and video views and the metrics that we might think matter. They do matter to some extent, but for the most part, it's a relationship game. And there's a lot of power in leveraging one relationship to get the next.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Podcasting Success Secrets. My name is Hector Santiesteban, and I'm your host for today. Our special guest is Mr. Dustin Riechmann. He is a good friend, a podcast host, and also a client of Amplify Media. So we're going to talk about all things podcasting and maybe some other stuff as well. So Dustin, thanks for hanging out today.
Yeah, man. I'm really excited, Hector. I love this format, and I don't get to talk about hosting very often because, I'm the podcast guesting guy as it pertains to my main business. But yeah, it's been awesome to launch our podcast with Amplify, and we're over the 1 year mark at this point. So I think I've definitely learned some lessons along the way. I'm excited to share.
Yeah, the last couple of weeks we hit episode 50, I think right around the new year, I think if it wasn't, right?
Actually, I'm misspeaking. So I don't know if we need to restart. It's been 2 years and we just hit 100 episodes.
100 episodes. Yeah. Okay. That makes more sense. Episode 100. Yeah. Very cool. I'd love to go into, Dustin, you had spent, maybe it was years, but a significant time really talking about the value of podcast guesting, so much to where you, like you said, you became the guy for podcast guesting. And I remember our conversations, you saying you wanted to start one, and it sort of happened over a couple of months where eventually, it was finally like, all right, I'm ready to get started. What was that process like? And maybe what sort of finally pushed you over the edge to say that you wanted to start your own show?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I reflected on a lot. So I got into podcast guesting like back in 2020 for a brand I was running at that time. COVID, couldn't leave the house, inspired a lot of people to start podcasts, but I wasn't really ready to start one at that point. But I saw the value in podcasting and it was something I consumed a lot of. So I went and got featured on other people's shows and we sold a lot of product and it was great. And so there was a period there of, I guess, 3 years, 3.5 years where I sort of wore this false badge of honor of like, you don't need a podcast, like just be a guest on other people's shows because it's so much better. It's so much easier. I still believe that it's the place to start and that it's easier and in many cases quicker to get traction to go be a guest. And also true is that I started to really recognize I was leaving a lot of value on the bone, if you will, by not having my own show, because the turnover point there was like I built up a ton of relationships. I had a lot more focus in my business. I knew exactly what I was offering. I knew what I liked to talk about, what I didn't like to talk about. So I'd been through like the ultimate refining process by guesting all over the place. And I was like, you know what? I should have a place to grow my own audience, a place to interview potential partners for, promotional partners and build relationships kind of on my own turf. So yeah, I think when I came to you, Hector, I was like, I know the guesting really works. It's been the number one driver of new revenue and I'm going to keep doing that. But in a sense, it was kind of like building on rented ground. And I'm like, you know what? I have enough clarity now about what I want this to be about that I think it's time to start my own show. And of course, it's evolved over 100 episodes or so since we started. But that was, as I can recall, that was really what pushed me over the edge, was just feeling like I was ready for it. I don't even know how to describe it other than I was ready for it. And I felt like there was a lot of traction I could gain if I hosted my own versus only guesting.
Yeah, I kind of liken it to high school parties because I was the guy that realized, like, I remember realizing, like, man, I'm not getting invited to like all the parties or like any of the parties. And so me and my buddy were like, well, why don't we just throw our own parties
Like
and then we don't have to worry about getting invited. And I think it's sort of the same kind of thing where,
yeah.
Yes, there is some value to being able to get invited onto someone else's platform. And it is also easier to invite someone on, right? It's also easier to invite people on to the show. And I remember early on getting some high leverage guests was something, was sort of a goal of yours, or at least using the pod to get you in the door and have conversations with people that might not otherwise be available. What was that like? Or were there any connections or guests or anything that sort of was a turning point and going, oh, like this is cool because of the people that I'm able to connect with now?
Yes, for sure. I would say March 2024, I believe. So like 3 or 4 months in, I had done a few solo episodes. I had had a guest host kind of come interview me to kick off the show. And I had a few clients that I had interviewed. So we're starting to get kind of a mix and a flow. But I find myself in Austin, Texas at this mastermind with digital marketer, and Ryan Deiss is in the room. And so, I kind of grew up in the digital marketing space going through digitalmarketer.com, and Ryan Deiss is a thought leader. So if anyone's been around marketing, that name might mean something to you. And so I saw Ryan, and I had actually heard him interviewed on a show on my flight down. I was kind of preparing for the mastermind, like, hey, if I meet him, I want to kind of hear what's new, what's he focused on. So I listened to an interview that he was on someone else's show. And in that show, he made a remark like, I really like guesting on podcasts because I don't have to travel, and I get sick of going to conferences, and everyone wants my attention, and I'm actually a super introvert. And so that sort of stuck with me. So I get in this mastermind. It's day two. We're at like a lunch break, or it's actually like a happy hour, and I kind of slide over near Ryan and introduce myself, and made small talk. And I basically said, hey, what? I actually heard you interviewed recently, and you're an introvert, like so am I. So why don't we just hang out here and have a beer and just talk to each other, and I'll keep you from having to talk to all these other people, kind of joking around. And he's like, oh, that's awesome. And we had a really good conversation about families and stuff like that. And as we were ending the conversation, 10 minutes in or something, I said, hey, by the way, I have a podcast, and you said on this show that you love doing them. Is there any chance I could have you on mine? And of course, he's kind of obligated at this point to say yes because of the nature of the conversation. And he's like, oh yeah, that'd be great. And people do that, and then they blow you off, and they never actually respond. But he gave me his email, and he said, yeah, email me and let's do it. And to his credit, he booked it. It's one of my favorite interviews still to this day. And it was just an amazing experience. To me, it was like a full circle moment. Someone I had looked up to as a mentor since 2004, like a long time, right? And what I realized kind of walking away from that was like, had I not had my own podcast, I would have had nothing to invite him to. And that 10-minute conversation would have just been it. But because I had that invitation, I had a place for him to come, share his thoughts. And I felt like we really got to know each other a lot more. And I wouldn't call him like a friend, but definitely an acquaintance. And he would recognize me in a room now because we spent all that extra time together. So that's one that really stands out. That was like the first quote unquote celebrity guest, I would say, in terms of like industry leaders that I got to interview. That was awesome.
Yeah, people are always surprised by how much easier it is to get someone to come onto your show than they
Yes.
would imagine. I don't know. I think they just have some misconceptions about it. But when you do have a platform and that is aligned, and what's nice is that, the show made sense with Ryan's message, and you're serving some of the same sort of people. And so it was a benefit to him too to come on as well, the content that's created. And so I think that if people can sort of see the win-winningness of having a podcast, it's not like an ask.
Yeah.
It's not like you're just taking from them.
It feels like a give. It's like, hey, I have a platform and I would love to interview you. So they don't typically ask, and I don't either when I'm looking to guest on someone else's show, like, how many downloads do you get? What's your reach? I'm sure that's an element of importance, but I think we all just like to be asked, right? And there's a status element to that. It's flattering. Frankly, it's kind of hard to say no to because you don't have any time to do one 30-minute interview on Zoom. Like, the objections are a lot easier to overcome versus, trying to get someone to come to you in person, or quote unquote let you pick their brain, because we all like to be featured for our expertise. And like you just said, as long as there's alignment, like, this is really easy for him, right? Like, he loves to teach this stuff and talk about it. He has the stories to tell. I like to bring, some uniqueness to each interview, but for the most part, it's a very comfortable thing for him to do. It's convenient. He can do it from his house or when he's traveling or his office. And so, yeah, I think it's just an easy yes from that standpoint. And when you're approaching it in that way, I think people realize that, what's the worst case? I spend 30 minutes and I get some new exposure, I get new marketing assets, and I build a relationship with someone who, even if I don't know them, they've taken the initiative to start and maintain a podcast, right? So, like, they are in the top, 10% of all business owners, and that they're actually doing stuff and they're committed to a craft. That's how I view it. Like, if someone's had a podcast, especially 100 episodes or more, it's like, I don't need to know that much more about them to know they are trustworthy, they're committed, they're probably successful in some way. And so I would love to build a relationship with them. And if the way I do that is to get to talk about myself and tell stories and teach stuff I love to teach for 30 minutes, sign me up. And I do feel, and I'm sure we'll talk more about it, some of the people I've been able to get access to by inviting them to my show kind of blows my mind. And some of them I'm like, why the heck would they say yes to this? But I think it's just a good status play, probably at the core kind of psychological level.
For sure. Yeah, it's definitely, like you said, a give. And if hosts can see that they're not actually taking and actually make it a give, because
Yeah.
have there been shows where it felt like I was just being taken from? Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are
Yep.
some hosts that maybe do it the wrong way. I think the other side of it that you sort of touched on is this: you have definitely have an ability to develop relationships with these people that you're bringing on, which I think is something that we can talk about and how you've sort of leveraged that into growing your business in other ways. But I also think that there's this sort of, it's not like guilty by association, but there is something to be said about sitting at the cool kids table. And all of a
Yes.
sudden someone knows who Ryan Deiss is or knows who some of these guests are, and they see you next to them or they see you having a conversation with them. There is I don't remember what the psychological, word is, but there is something that happens in someone's brain where just that association goes, oh,
Yes.
Dustin must be someone of some merit or something if he's talking to Ryan Deiss. And so you can sort of
Absolutely.
leverage those plays as well.
Yeah. So that's 100% true. I've experienced a lot of that where you kind of get this implied credibility or authority because if Ryan's willing to spend his time with Dustin, then it sort of equates Dustin and Ryan in some conscious or subconscious way when people see that. And the other thing that happens, of course, is getting that first sort of marquee guest. This happened in person. It was like a great opportunity. But because I got Ryan Deiss, it was a lot easier to get eventually, Ryan Levesque. And then Ryan Levesque begets Nathan Barry. Nathan Barry begets Justin Welsh. And these people that are big creators, people I really admire. Once that first domino falls, it also becomes easier and easier because they're not the first one sort of quote unquote taking a risk by saying yes. Like they've got people that they respect, that they've seen speak. Maybe they've been on their podcast, and this wicked web of kind of goodwill starts to get spun. And it's a lot easier even then to get people to say yes. Again, regardless of like downloads and video views and the metrics that we might think matter. They do matter to some extent, but for the most part, it's a relationship game. And there's a lot of power in leveraging one relationship to get the next.
That's sort of a hard thing too, is because traditionally the metrics that sort of people monitored were downloads or rankings. And I've talked a lot
Yes.
about this on the show about like, that used to be the gamut you would run. You would go in and you would try and get a bunch of downloads at the beginning. So you shoot up the rankings and then, that was great. The challenge that I found was that when we did that, it didn't necessarily do anything for the business.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily translate into anything. And so for you as a host who's, over 100 episodes in, 2 years into it, what are some of the markers or indicators for you that the show is something worth continuing investing in, both from a time and sort of money perspective?
Yeah, I'd say first and foremost, it's the aforementioned relationships, right? So the fact that I can call as peers or associates in some way, these people I really respect as creators, like that's important. Yeah, for me, I definitely get leads from this. So, and those leads do sometimes come from listeners, but more so it comes from the relationships built in the interview process. So, by interviewing someone, they could be a potential client. Like I do, maybe this is the easier way to answer this is maybe break down the types of episodes I do now. And then maybe we could talk about how each of those has benefited the business. Is that good?
Yeah.
So I still do we'll call them aspirational interviews. So that's like, hey, this person is sort of above me in terms of reach or authority. And I want to invite them on just because I want to be associated with them and get to know them and learn from them. Another episode type for us that's still an interview would be more of a case study. So we will pretty often interview someone from our own alumni or client community. So someone that's been through our podcast guesting program and they are having success, and we'll come feature them, not just as a case study. So it's not like come tell everyone why they should join my program, but it's like get to know them, actually learn their area of expertise. And then if they do want to mention that, they're growing through our program, that's great. But it deepens our relationship with our clients. That provides a reward for someone going through the program, and it's like from an unannounced bonus that they can like apply and come to our show and they get that asset out of it. The third type, which I was starting to allude to here about getting clients, is we started at the end of last year doing a coaching series. So the idea there is like, hey, Dustin's a coach, he knows a lot about marketing strategy and podcast guesting. and you can't really buy my time, but you can get direct coaching from me as a podcast episode. And so we allow people to apply for those spots, and then we select like five and we call it a coaching series. So we've had like 85 people apply. We've only selected five so far. I'm going to do another round soon. And these are really deep dive episodes. So 60, 90, sometimes more than that, 90-minute episodes. I'm literally just coaching someone as if no one's ever going to hear this. It's like a deep dive one-on-one coaching session, helping them with their offers and their positioning and their marketing and their strategy. And all of that is free for them. They just have to allow us to release it as a podcast episode. So that's created a lot of cool collateral, and it gives people a sneak peek into what it's like to work with us. And of course, those individuals are oftentimes ideal clients for us, and after getting an hour of value and transformation, they're pretty likely to be like, yeah, tell me more about your program, this was cool, I want to know more. So those are kind of our three interview types. And then the other thing that we've done, and I'm starting to emphasize actually more, are solo episodes. So I'm a pretty big believer that you should do some solo content to build your own authority so that you're not only positioned as a good interviewer, but that you actually have your own expertise. So the coaching series is one way to do that. But I also like to do some solo episodes. And the solo episodes are great because they become assets of the business in a sense. So we use those for content repurposing. So if I do a deep dive on the three types of offers you should have in your creator business, that can become LinkedIn posts, email newsletters, obviously video, short form video. So it's a great source of content for other channels that are more discoverable than maybe podcasting natively. And then we use them a lot for sort of conversion assets. So FAQ questions, we put them in our sales process sometimes. So if someone's like, well, if you guys do this podcast guesting coaching, like, how does that compare with hiring a booking agency? I'm like, I'm glad you asked. Here's an 18-minute episode where I go deep on exactly answering that question. So anymore, I've got pretty much a podcast episode in response to any kind of question people would have. And so that's really useful too. So you can kind of hear in there, there's different benefits to the business for different types of episodes that we do. And we've continued to refine that over time. And none of those were really why I started the podcast. I originally thought I'd be like, finding an ideal client on LinkedIn and be like, come on my show. And then I would, talk to them a little bit and then sell them our program. I mean, I will admit, I thought this would be a little more of a transactional lead generation tool. And from the very first episode, I totally didn't want to do that. And once I got into it, I'm like, yeah, that's not who I want to be. I want to be someone who's got depth and really cares and empathizes and hears people. And naturally, leads and sales come from that without it feeling transactional. And I feel like we've really found our flow, especially in the last probably the last 50 of the 100 episodes.
Do you feel like the show has evolved, or do you think that there are maybe not distinct, but certain stages that the show went through over those 100 plus episodes?
Yeah, for sure. I would say like the first phase, I just thought this is gonna be an interview show, and I'm kind of going to interview what I was describing. Like I'm going to interview ideal clients and then use this as a way to get people to buy our program. That was like V1. We never actually recorded any episodes that way. We kind of kicked things off with a client and a coach of mine named Cassie, and I had her interview me in the very first episode. And it was all about like, who am I deeply? What's the show really about? What's seven figure leap mean? What's the meaning behind this? And I think that sort of changed the tone for me. Like after that first episode, I'm like, this could be a really freaking cool show. Like I don't want it to be transactional. And I'd say phase two is when I started interviewing people in my close circle. So it was easy to be like, hey, you want to come? You want to come? You want to come? Like I already had relationships with different people who I knew would want to do it. And that was good. It got my reps in and gave me a comfort level. I would say that Ryan Deiss story was an inflection point where I realized I can go outside my own circle and invite people externally who I probably wouldn't have access to otherwise. So I started to do a lot more of that. I would call that phase two. And then phase three, I would say, is when this I'd say phase three is actually when I started doing more solo content. So that's when it was like, you know what? I like the interviews. They're frankly easier for me, but I need to challenge myself and make at least like a third of our content solo thought leadership content versus just interviews. And I would say phase four, most recently, is when I added that coaching series. And then, right now I'm sort of in a new mindset of what's possible if we view this as the source of content that can be amplified in a lot of different channels. And I think the solo content in particular is important for that. So I think moving forward, it's going to be more like 50-50 solo content versus guest episodes, because I have so many more ideas for solo content now that I have a place that I intend to use it with different content distribution.
Yeah, it seems like what you've sort of done is figure out how the show can actually aid the business, how it can feed into the
Yeah,
business.
thousand
So many
percent.
hosts just record content or talk to their friends or just hop on and just talk because they know that they're supposed to record an episode.
Yeah,
But I think you've been very intentional with the types of guests and the types of topics and the types of episodes that you've been creating over the time.
yeah, 100%. That was always the intent, but then I don't know, like the application of that has really changed over time. And I think it's just 'cause I've gotten more clear and I understand more how this side of the mic works, because again, I had a lot of experience as a guest, and most of those sort of follow the same flow, right? And it's like, and I think I started off with this podcast, that of my podcast, trying to replicate that, which is probably why the very first episode is actually me being interviewed by a guest host, because I'm like, well, I know how to be a guest, so let me first be a guest. But I think over time, as I've matured and I feel confident doing solo episodes, and I know how to like pace things and have a good hook and like just be a better content creator from a solo perspective, more and more of that has found its way into the show. And like I said, when I'm doing guest interviews, I'm a little more selective about that. And there's a specific purpose per interview type, right? Case study has its place, a coaching series has its place, the sort of the aspirational, when I get a chance to interview someone who I would also pay $10,000 to have an hour with, that has a place. And so, yeah, I think I've just got a rhythm for one thing, but also like I know when we plan an episode what the purpose of that particular episode is, versus just like, yeah, it's Tuesday, man, I got to record something. What can I scrape together? We don't really operate that way anymore.
Mm. That was actually my next question, which is, are there things that you did at the beginning that you don't do? And so I guess maybe you can share what that planning process looks like, or is it, or how deep that goes? Because I think that so many hosts can benefit from just being more intentional with their episode strategy.
Yeah. It's nothing fancy. It's just a Google Doc basically I can access on my phone or on my computer. And that is primarily ideas for solo episodes. Like to me, that's the harder work, is coming up with original ideas to rap on for 15 to 30 minutes by myself. So that's that part of it. As far as other planning, the guest things, I sort of take them as they come. So there is no cadence to like, hey, every third one is a coaching series and every fourth one is an aspirational interview. It's just like, as I get opportunities to invite people that I admire, they're going to get recorded at the first opportunity that matches their schedule. I'm recording an episode tomorrow as we speak with Cameron Harold, he wrote Vivid Vision. He's like a really famous COO. And like that just happened through a mutual introduction. And I'm like, here's my calendar. You find the first spot that works for you, and we'll work around that. Cause I think, respecting people in that way is important. And then, yeah, case studies kind of come up naturally because we have a constant flow of people graduating our core program and then looking for opportunities to interview people there. So, we publish weekly. It tends to work in batches where I'll typically do, if I'm going to do a solo episode, I almost always do at least two, because it's like, well, if I'm going to get in the mindset and sit in this office and have the mic set up the right way, I might as well just knock out two. And I got plenty of ideas. So I usually take those ideas transparently, I put them in Chat GPT. It knows kind of my base of knowledge. And I'm like, here's what I want to cover. Like, help me outline this. And I take a rough outline, I put it in another Google Doc, and that sort of becomes my very loosely defined teleprompter. And that just becomes a bullet point summary of what I want to jam on. So that's kind of the process and the flow. So all guest interviews happen on Tuesdays, and I try to do the solo episodes also on Tuesdays, usually on weeks when I don't have a guest booked. And I'll spend like an hour and record 2 episodes at a time. And that way we always are several weeks in advance on our publishing schedule.
Yeah. The last couple of things I wanted to get your opinion on is, a lot of podcasters will do it on their own. They'll go out, and because it's very possible to do on your own.
Yeah.
What has it been like, or what's been your experience being on the other side, having sort of a production partner like Amplify to handle all of the stuff, because we haven't talked anything about editing or
Yeah.
publishing or that sort of stuff. So I'd love for you to just share what that sort of experience has been like, having someone to handle those sort of things.
Yeah. Well, it's been awesome. 100% transparently. There's no zero chance I have a podcast if I'm doing anything myself outside of hitting record and managing the guest relationships, which is something I enjoy and it kind of comes natural in the work that I do. The reason you haven't heard me mention once editing, publishing, titling episodes, distributing on YouTube, any of that kind of stuff is I don't do any of that, but all of it happens, right? And so, and Hector, you probably remember this. I think when I came to you through our existing relationship, and I'm like, I really feel like it's time to do a podcast. Here's the deal. My role has to be to literally hit a red blinking button that says record and hit end and then be done. And like that's got to be the extent of my involvement. Otherwise, I'll never be able to keep up with it because this is adding into a full plate. And of course, that's what Amplify does, a very white glove service. And so from the conceptualization of like, what do we call it? What's the artwork and what's the description and how do we want to do the intro? Like, of course, all that kind of has a kind of a one-time effort. And that was that. And you guys helped a ton with that. But from day 5 or whenever we had that established and I recorded that first episode, I've done literally nothing except show up and hit record on whatever platform you told me to record on. And I'm sure I could go back and tell you guys, change this headline, or I don't really like the way that you edited this, but I haven't had to. Like I've touched this podcast 0 times in over 100 episodes. That's a huge testament to your work. I think to the power of having a done for you kind of white glove partner. I just wouldn't be able to do it without that. And you guys have been exceptional in making that happen. I'm a very detailed person and detail oriented person. So when I say that I haven't requested, hardly any kind of edits or changes to headlines, that's saying a lot because I'm pretty picky when it comes to that sort of thing. But you guys have just done a masterful job, I feel like, in capturing my voice and the things that how I want to be represented in my brand. Yeah. So I only have good things to say. Again, that's not to say that people can't do this themselves or figure it out or edit their own show or use AI tools and all that. But I have zero interest in that. And again, there's no way in the world I'd have 100 plus episodes under my belt. I definitely would have pod faded probably within about 10 episodes had I decided to try to do it myself. There's just no way. The bandwidth isn't there for that. And I think more importantly for someone listening, even if you're like, oh, I got some time, if you're going to use your time in podcasting, you should use it on the strategic side. Like, what is this for? Some of the stuff we went through already. You should use it on relationship building with other podcasters. And frankly, you should use it on guesting because then guesting is how you can build more relationships and you can spread the word more about your message. You should not use it on production. I don't know why anyone would how anyone could make a business case if you're running a business and you're using podcasting as a marketing channel and a place to support your business, how you could possibly justify using your own scarce time to do podcasting, because it's probably not your area of podcasting, editing and production and distribution. Your highest and best use of your time, your unique ability is going to be in the thought leadership and the relationships that drive, the strategy behind the podcast, not in pushing buttons and figuring out how to make things sound clean and all that. So it was a very long way of saying I'm passionate about staying in your lane and doing your best work. And you should hire Hector or some other company to handle production if you're going to use this as a business tool.
It can become its own job for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Dustin, I got 2 questions for you as we wrap up and get out of here. First question is, if people want to get more connected with you, find out about your programs or anything that you're up to, where's the best place for people?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's just sevenfigureleap.com and the number 7. So sevenfigureleap.com. We help mission driven entrepreneurs grow 7-figure brands by telling their story. So the main thing we do is help on the guesting side of the mic. So we have an expert who's a coach, consultant, agency owner, and they're like, hey, I like to teach, I like to coach, I got stories to tell. And we help them get on the right podcast, tell the right stories, and be able to sell more of their programs that way. And I really believe that perfect marriage is guesting and hosting, and you should be doing both. And but sevenfigureleap.com is where everything lives on that side for my business.
And we'll link all that up in the show notes as always for you listeners. And my last question for you, Dustin, is, in your opinion, what is the secret to having a successful podcast?
I'd say consistency. And when I say consistency, there's a lot of underlying rings that sort of support that. One is having professional support, and as we've talked about, to make it consistent. The other thing I think with consistency is having a strategy behind it so that you're getting results from it, so that you're motivated to keep doing it. And I guess the final kind of thing I think about with consistency is the name of the game in business growth is relationship building. So if you can use your podcast as a relationship building tool, it becomes a virtuous cycle, because the more you build relationships, the more your podcast grows and the more access you have to cool guests and results, and the more people you know, the more your business grows too. So using podcasting as part of your business and not like some complete side project, I think is really important. And then just staying really consistent. We haven't missed a week yet, despite lots of crazy stuff that happens in life as a dad and busy entrepreneur. And I'm really proud of that. I don't think it's something to be taken lightly to have over 100 episodes with really cool guests, lots of variety, and to be proud of each and every episode. And so definitely kudos to the work of Amplify Media and helping me pull that off. But yeah, I'd say if you can get into the podcast hosting game, or the key to success as someone who's in this industry for a long time, is not quitting and being consistent. And that's kind of a trite answer. But like I said, what that really means is you're getting business results from it, you're growing, you're getting relationship capital created from it, because that's what's going to motivate you to keep going. So that's my secret to podcasting success.
Well said. Well said. Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us. For all you listeners, go out, check the show notes, get connected with Dustin, come hang out with us in our community and mastermind, where you get a chance to hang out with myself as well. If you're not already subscribed or following wherever you're listening to this, please make sure you hit that follow button. If you want to get connected with me, you can search Hector Santiesteban on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or X, and YouTube. And then if you want to find out more about what we do at Amplify, go to amplifymedia.com. Most importantly, y'all, keep publishing. See you on the next one.